Have you ever knitted a blooper and wished there was something that you could do with it? This was supposed to be the front of a vest, and it's Fair Isle. And I got it all the way done before I realized that I did not like the tension I'd used and the fabric was too stiff. And as you probably are aware, unraveling Fair Isle is sort of a pain in the neck. So today I thought I'd show you how I can turn this into a hat, and you can do the same thing. We'll start by making a pattern, and the good thing is that you can use this pattern over and over if you want to. I'm making a man's hat. I want it 22 inches around, so I'm taping enough sheets of paper together to get a 22-inch width. I want the hat 9 inches from the bottom of the brim to the top of the crown, but I'm going to make a mark 9.5 inches up the paper so that I have a little seam allowance built in. Do this in several places so you can make a line all the way across the pattern, 9.5 inches up in this case from the lower edge. We want to do the same thing 6 inches from the lower edge, or in other words, about 2/3 of the total height the hat will be. Now we have two lines parallel to the lower edge, one 6 inches, one 9.5 inches from the lower edge. Along the middle line, divide it into 3 sections. In this case, each section is 7 1/3 inches. Along the top line, mark the center point of each 7 1/3 inch section. The first of these points will be 3 2/3 inches from one edge, and then each of the points will be 7 2/3 inches apart across the work. And we're ready to trim along the zigzag line with scissors. The lower part is the pattern, the top part is waist. An alternate way to do this is to make 4 points rather than 3. This is pretty easy stuff, so I would suggest that you try both methods and see which hat crown you prefer. Now lay the pattern on the piece of knitting and trim around the pattern. I'm using the items that you see laying there, such as the ruler and the box top, as weights because I prefer them to pins, but pinning would work too. Here's the hat ready to sew. I had made a hung hem when this was intended as a vest front, and it will make a suitable hat brim. To prepare for assembly, we first need to serge the edges. You could also zigzag, but those who have a serger will definitely prefer to use it. We're only using the serger to overcast the ends, not trying to trim any off, but any yarn ends that stick out will get caught by the knife and not only overcast but trimmed. This is plenty to stop the cut edge from fraying. I aligned my pattern with one edge of the knitting so I don't have to overcast that edge. Now use the sewing machine to sew the nearest edges of each V together. These two should be seamed together, then these two should be seamed together, and finally the two outer edges. They get seamed all the way from the top of the crown down through the edge of the hem. Even though this is knitted fabric, I usually find that the straight stitch on the sewing machine does fine, but you may use a narrow zigzag if it makes you feel more comfortable. Back tack to secure the end of each seam. Here one seam is complete and these two edges are ready to be joined. Note the foot I'm using. This is really a zigzag foot and I'm using a straight stitch. The reason for that is because this one curls up a little bit at the edge towards me, and that helps it to not catch on the Fair Isle floats. I just sew the edges of the center back seam together. This point is where the V's that we cut in the pattern begins, and an optional step is to round this area a little bit. It will make for a tighter fitting, smoother to the head crown without bump. So in other words, instead of starting to angle right off into your zigzag, cut the corner a little. If you are a skilled seamstress as well as a knitter, there is no need to be hesitant or ashamed of blending the two skills. I have a whole book on the subject called Knitting and Sew On that is full of tips and tricks making beautifully finished machine knits with the help of a sewing machine. There's a playlist on the subject too. And this hat is also part of my 100 recycled hats challenge to myself. That playlist is full of other hats that I have made with recycling yarn from a project. Some of them, many of them, it's been rewound. But in this case, the Fair Isle seemed fruitless to rewind, so we are using cut and sew. Links to all these videos, playlists, and to the book are in the program notes.